Hello and welcome. The world of Chief Technology Officers or CTOs is a somewhat rarefied one, as my guest today is willing to admit, but it's also something that can be cracked if you're a woman with the right tools and the right presence of mind and perhaps some knowledge beforehand. And let's try and get that knowledge from Rebecca Parsons, Chief Technology Officer of ThoughtWorks, a software product and services company. Rebecca, thank you very much for speaking with us.
So
not only are you the CTO of a reasonably large IT company, but you're also an academic who crossed over.
Yes.
Right. So you're a Dr. Rebecca Parsons. So tell us how that transition happened and then what you're doing currently.
Well, it's interesting because I actually started out in industry. So I'm one of those people who, after I finished my undergraduate degree, I went to work for 5 years before I went back to graduate school. And so I crossed from the business world into academia and research and then back out again.
Was all of that in computer science?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, I've worked in heavy manufacturing. I've worked for a computer company, a semiconductor company, across the spectrum. So I've seen, I think, every major sector of our business over the course of my career. But when I went to graduate school, I wasn't expecting to go into academia. My own perception of myself was that I wasn't really cut out to be an academic, and that I liked being in the business world. But I was encouraged to try, and when I finished my postdoc, that was the time to try. And so I was a faculty member and reaffirmed what I thought I knew about myself, which is that I love theory. I think some of the studies that are going on in academia are wonderful, and I love keeping up with it. But for me, I need to face real world problems, and I need to have the variety of things that go on, particularly in a consulting company where I get to see many different clients, many different technologies, many different domains and industries, and it helps because I get bored very easily.
Right. So you having joined ThoughtWorks, I mean, tell us about the journey there, I mean, and to becoming the CTO and so on.
Well, I started as basically a senior developer. ThoughtWorks is a rather unique organization in many ways, and the founder will tell you that I was hired despite the fact that I had a PhD, not because I had a PhD in computer science. And so there was a little bit of I had to prove to myself that I wasn't coming from this ivory tower of academia, that I really did know what the day-to-day life of a programmer was like. So I started on one of our larger Java projects. It was one of the first two early large-scale agile software development projects that were going on as well, and worked my way up to that dreaded architecture word, which we even have a different definition of architect. But after about a year and a half, I moved over to the UK to start our office over there in the UK, working for two of our large clients over there, and became CTO after I moved back from the UK to the US.
Right. So tell us now, why is it that more women are not, let's say, at the level that you are in so many other companies?
Well, I think part of it is that the CTO role, although there is an aspect of my team is the entire technology community of ThoughtWorks. I'm not a manager. I don't have P&L responsibility. I don't have people, I don't have a large number of people that work for me. The CTO role is in many ways an individual contributor role. And I even see this within ThoughtWorks. Women often get the subtle pressure to move into more of a project management role or a line management role, taking care of teams, rather than staying on an individual contributor role as a technologist. And so you get women who are diverted simply because they're taking advantage of other skills that they have rather than staying on a technical individual contributor path. So I think that's one source of the problem. I also think that in general, it's difficult for women to trumpet their own accomplishments. And again, the CTO role is a highly technical individual contributor role that is based on what you can do as a technologist. And if nobody knows what you do, you're never going to advance along a path that will lead you to a chief technology role. I was fortunate in that I had people who were willing to do a lot of that bragging for me, so I didn't have to do as much of it for myself. Because that isn't something that comes naturally to women very often. So, you know, I think there's that aspect of it. And finally, the CTO role, at least as the way I practice it, it's a very externally facing role. I'm speaking at conferences, I'm serving on panels, I'm giving workshops, I'm talking to the press, I'm talking to analysts, and that, putting yourself out in the public eye like that is also something that it takes a certain personality, and to find a woman who has the personality that wants to, you know, speak in public, and I don't necessarily like it all the time, but I know it's a part of my job, who is also technical. You take the intersection of that group, and it's a fairly small group, and then you take out the people who have been subtly pushed onto a more management background,
right,
away from the individual contributor, and it shrinks the pool.
Right. So in a very broad sense, what are the couple of things that you would say are the strengths that women have when it comes to technology or computer science, and what are the weaknesses, as you see?
Well, I think the strengths, women actually have quite logical minds. I think many of the interesting problems that we're facing today in computer science and technology are how different systems, different processes, different problems interact with each other. And women like to understand how it all works. Trying to take a very narrow slice can be more difficult because, well, there's this factor over here and there's that factor over there, and for me at least, I find it's all those interactions and all the different combinations and how all that stuff works together, which is quite interesting. And if you start to look at today's more complex systems where you have smaller services interacting across multiple organizational boundaries with some additional sensors and other external devices thrown in, that's a massive set of moving parts and how they work together. And I think that's something that women like to grapple with, those complex interactions and how to keep track of all of those different things that are moving at the same time. I think from a weaknesses perspective, it's more going back to what I was saying before. You have to feel confident in your ability to go after and solve a problem. And I don't think this is unique in computer science at all. You have to want to be willing to put your hand up and say, I'm going to go after that one, and I'm going to solve that problem, and I'm going to learn that. And trying to own that vision and say, this is really what I want to try to accomplish, that can be difficult for women sometimes. I know it took a long time for me to be able to say, this is what I want to do. I was very clear on what I didn't want to do. But when people would say, so where do you want your career to go? What would you like to do? I always struggled with that question because there was this vague feeling that, well, if I say I want to do this and there's this really interesting thing over here that I don't know about yet, they're not going to think of me because I've said I wanted to do this, so they're not going to ask. And I always felt like I was cutting off options.
Right, so what are you telling, for instance, young people or young, let's say, women engineers who come and work with you today? I mean, I'm sure they come to you as a mentor and they would seek your advice. What are you telling them today, which may be in some ways different because the economic environment has changed, the technology environment has changed, consumers have changed?
Yeah, well, there are three things that I focus on, and the first is if you love math, computer science, engineering, technology, you don't need to apologize for it. You're not weird. There's nothing wrong with it. If that's what your passion is, then go for it. And don't let anybody tell you you should be doing something else because this isn't feminine, or gee, don't you really want to be working with people? No, I want to be working with computers, thank you very much. So that's the first thing. If you're really passionate about it, you know, go for it and don't let anybody tell you that you shouldn't be doing it. The second is to really try to make sure you keep current. Be confident in your ability to learn new things. And that doesn't mean you have to learn everything all the time. You have to be ready to learn something new. Like many fields, technology is exploding. And if I tried to learn in detail every new language, every new framework, every new hardware architecture, every new algorithmic approach, all of that, that was happening, I'd never eat, sleep, or anything. But what I am sure of is that when I need to know this new language or this new framework or this new architecture, that I can dive in and learn it. And so women need to be positioned not to know everything, but to know how to learn anything that they might need to learn. And you have to be confident in your ability to say, yes, I can learn that. Maybe I don't know it today, but I'll know it tomorrow, and go after that. And then the final thing really is to be willing to ask for what you want. And I'm not a good role model for that, as I was just saying. But you have to be willing to step forward and say, yes, I want to do this. People are not necessarily always going to come and ask you, would you like to? And so be ready to step up for an opportunity and say, yes, I would really like to do that. Organizationally, we need to do a better job of not assuming people won't want to do something, but I think it's also a personal responsibility that we need to step up and say, yes, I can do that, I want to do that, will you give me the opportunity?
Right, so I mean, actually that's a question I've been meaning to ask you and some others I've been talking to. The responsibility to take action sort of on the majority lies on the woman rather than the organization. Though organizations accept that this is the nature of how a woman will approach a situation and so on. So is that also a failure of organizations to?
I do think it's both. I think that organizations can make it easier for women to step forward and for them to be given opportunities. But at the end of the day, organizations can only do so much. We're a 2,500 person organization. We have incredibly talented people, women and men, scattered all across the globe. We're in 29 different cities. I can't know what all of them can do. Right. And I can't go and speak to every one of them and ask them. And so people do have to take responsibility for making sure that they put their ideas out there and they say, this is what I've been working on, and this is what I find interesting, or this is what I find challenging, and engage with other people within the organization. Once that happens, I do think the organization does need to do a bit more than it has done in the past. It's easy for people to just look around to, okay, these are all the people that I know, and because the vast majority of our industry is men, the vast majority of the people around any person are going to be men, and say, okay, I'm going to pick from this pool. I do think we have to, even within organizations, cast our net a bit wider and try to say, okay, are there women in this group that you haven't put forward before? Is there someone who might be interested in this? So I do think it's a shared responsibility. Organizations can clearly do more, but I think it is also an individual responsibility, particularly to say, these are the kinds of things that I'm interested in. You can't rely on an organization to decide that for you.
Right. So last question, divided into two questions. So first is do you have a role model that you think you would look up to and share that with someone who's watching this? And secondly, is there one situation that you can remember where you think you've come at the solution differently because of being a woman?
Those are both very hard questions. I think this isn't a specific solution to a problem.
Sure.
I'll start with the second one. But I think I am far more apt to look for a multidisciplinary solution to a problem than a lot of men are. And I think it goes back to this, looking at all of the different parts. I will generally come up with an answer that is broader and takes into account more of these sort of peripheral factors.
And that's not only because you've been in academia and so on?
I don't think so. I think that's the way. Yeah. I've always been a systems thinker ever since I was a kid. Now, whether that's because I'm a woman or what, I don't really know where that comes from. But I do know our former CEO and I used to have conversation. He said, it's very difficult to talk to you because you answer a question and I wonder if you really heard the question that I asked until I figured out what other things you were bringing into the conversation. So I do think I have a different perspective. I'm very I'm much less laser focused on a particular narrow path. Narrow not being a bad thing, but focused rather than I'm going to bring in all of these other things, which, depending on what you're looking for, that might be good or that might be bad. Sometimes, yes, you just want what is the shortest distance between A and B, and you really don't care about all this interesting stuff that's off on the side. So I do think that's something. My role models have really changed over time.
Sure.
And so it's really hard to identify an individual right now. Sure. But the characteristics of the role models, always curious and intellectually courageous, is something that I look for. And I've sometimes, that's being courageous even when all of the forces are allied against you, and do you really think that's a sensible approach to be taking to the problem? That kind of courage that, no, I know that there's something here and I want to keep working on that. So that's certainly one of the characteristics. I also look for people who care about bringing other people along with them, who want to help, who want to provide inspiration. So women like Anita Borg, Nora Denzel, who was on a panel, she gave a keynote last year. Women like that who are willing to get up and tell their stories, warts and all. These are the mistakes I made. These are the things that hopefully you can learn from me messing up. Because what they're really concerned about is helping other people, other women follow behind them, or in fact, other people follow behind them. So those are the kinds of characteristics that I look for.
That's a very warm note to end on. Thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.